This isn't a magic trick, although this cabbage does do something magical to make the most incredibly moist chocolate cake. Well, a form of it at least. It's a key ingredient in this low carb cake. But first, let's start with our dry ingredients. Since we're making a keto cake, you'll need 2 cups of almond flour. Even though I'm using super fine almond flour, you can still get that gritty texture from almond flour in cakes, so I like to sift my flour first using one of these old-fashioned sifters with the crank handle. Next, I add 1/2 cup of oat fiber. Make sure you're getting oat fiber and not oat flour. They're not the same thing. Oat fiber has 0 net carbs. To make this a chocolate cake, add in 1/2 cup of unsweetened cocoa powder, then 1 teaspoon of baking powder, a teaspoon of baking soda, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Mix that together until it's combined. And when selecting cocoa powder, look for one that doesn't contain any added sugar. Like a raw cacao powder is fine. I like to use Hershey's 100% cacao because it's fairly inexpensive and I can find it at my local store. Before moving on to the wet ingredients to learn how cabbage plays a role in this cake, I want to appreciate how much proper hydration with element electrolytes has played a role in my low carb journey. On a keto diet, you don't always have optimal levels of important electrolytes like sodium, magnesium, and potassium, mostly because very little insulin is released, and that's what helps signal the reabsorption of these electrolytes. So they get flushed out. This can be problematic if you're fasting or if you're exercising while you're fasted. I use element electrolytes because they have 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium in each packet. It's free from sugars or dyes, and they come in a wide variety of flavors. And right now, Element is offering my viewers a free sample pack with any order. That's 8 single serving packets free with any Element order, so it's a great way to try all 8 flavors. Get yours at drinkelement.com/KetoFocus. This deal's only available through my link, so you need to head to drinklmnt.com/KetoFocus right after we finish making this cake. Cheers! Moving on to the wet ingredients. Add in 1/2 cup of unsalted softened butter. Start to cream that with an electric mixer to get it fluffy and add in some air. Then gradually add in 1 1/3 cups of sugar-free sweetener. And it doesn't matter which one you use, just as long as it measures cup for cup with sugar. I'm using Lecanto Classic because it's one of my favorites. Once that's mixed together and it's as fluffy as it's gonna get, crack in 3 eggs. Beat well to mix it together after you add each egg. Then a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now let's talk about this. I'm not actually putting the raw cabbage into this cake, but I am using a form of it as I mentioned earlier. What's a tangy fermented condiment that's made from cabbage?
Bueller.
Sauerkraut, and you can definitely make your own from cabbage. I have a recipe on my website, ketofocus.com, that shows you how, but I'm just gonna use the stuff from the can because I'm a lazy cook and I don't have time to fiddle with making my own sauerkraut today. If you've never heard of adding sauerkraut to chocolate cake before, you're probably thinking that I've lost my marbles or that it's gonna taste disgusting, but adding sauerkraut to a cake works similarly to adding carrots to a carrot cake, which I'll tell you more about that later on. It adds moisture. Keto baked goods and cakes can be dry because they're sugar-free. Sugar in regular cakes not only sweetens cakes, but it helps to trap in moisture. Sugar-free sweeteners don't do that. The tanginess from the sauerkraut also complements the sweet chocolate flavor. Don't worry, it's not gonna taste bitter because you wanna strain and squeeze out any excess liquid. I just use a paper towel to help with this. Then chop up the sauerkraut further into finer chunks. To our cake batter, slowly add in the dry ingredients and the sauerkraut, alternating between the two to get everything evenly combined. This batter is gonna be thick, more like a brownie batter. So to thin it out, pour in 1 cup of water. Now that's a better cake batter consistency. Pour this into prepared cake pans that are sprayed with cooking spray and with a parchment circle on the bottom. This size of cake pan is around 8 inches. These will go into a 350-degree oven to bake for 30 minutes. While it's baking, let's make my favorite sugar-free buttercream frosting. Start by adding 2 cups of unsalted butter to a bowl. What's that you say? It looks like 1 cup of butter and not 2 cups? Well, you're actually right, but I had to end up doubling this recipe just to get that thick layer of chocolate frosting I was going for. So don't pay attention to the ingredients going in, just follow what I'm saying. Once you cream that until it's fluffy, slowly add in powdered sugar-free sweetener. You'll need 3 cups. Then 1/2 cup of unsweetened cocoa powder, 1/2 cup of sugar-free chocolate chips that I melted in the microwave at 30-second intervals. And if you don't want to use melted chocolate, just use more cocoa powder. then 6 tablespoons of heavy whipping cream to help thin it out, 4 teaspoons of vanilla, a half a teaspoon of salt. Once the cake is done baking, let it cool for around 5 minutes. Then loosen the edges with a knife. Then carefully flip your cake over onto a wire rack to cool completely, but don't flip it like I did because that was stupid.
Oh my God.
It'll break. It's a good demonstration of how much moisture is in this cake. Ideally, you should have just placed that cooling wrap on top of the cake and then flipped it over, but that didn't happen. Once this cake is decorated, nobody's gonna know what happened, unless it dropped on the floor. But even then, you got the 5-second rule to save ya. Also, disclaimer, I am not a cake decorator. I have all the fancy tools, but none of the skills. So it took me way too long to decorate this cake, but after 3 hours, I think I did a pretty decent job. Can you taste the sauerkraut in this cake? Nope, at least I can't. So it's a great way to sneak in some extra vegetables for your kids' diet. That's a joke because it's like saying that you can use carrot cake to replace the veggies on their dish. Although I do have a pretty amazing keto carrot cake recipe that uses real carrots and is only 5 grams of carbs per slice. Click here to see how to make it.